Hello and welcome to another lighting diagram. My name is Trenton Hoshiko, and today we're talking about Interior with an Easel, Bredgade 25 by Vilhelm Hammershøi. So this is a kind of deceptively simple painting, but I really like it because I am a huge fan of window light. If you've watched pretty much any of these, you'll probably guess that I love windows, lighting through windows, lighting with windows, natural sunlight coming through windows, artificial lights going through windows, putting curtains on windows and using windows. I just really like windows, and there's something that's so, I don't know, almost like romantic about light coming through a window and making these diagonal, rectangular patterns on floors or walls or other surfaces, and this painting captures that. But tonally, it's very much like pretty much all white. Some of them are bluer, some of them are a little bit more pink or orange, and some of them are more white. And that I think is really interesting to me because it has this like relatively simple frame-in-frame composition, but all of the angles combine with this like subtle, delicate gradient of white towards blue and white towards pink, all really work together, and I really like this. So before we get started, I want to say that if you want to get my free Filmmaker Tools template for Draw.io, it's available over on my Patreon, and you can just go right here to download the latest version of it. While you're there, if you want to join my Patreon, I have both free tiers and paid tiers starting at just $2. Those paid tiers do support making these types of videos. I'm currently at 20 members, and I'm really hoping that I can push up to 30 between paid and free tiers here real soon. So if you're interested in that, go over there. If you're new to using Draw.io for lighting diagramming and this template, I have a video linked down in the video's description that will help you get started with importing an image as a reference, getting the template put in, all that good stuff. All of these things are linked down in the video's description. But now let's start talking about this painting and breaking down some of the lighting. Now, the thing that is cool about this is you could basically get this look by just waiting for the sun to come in those windows off to the side. You might have to wait a couple months to get the exact angle. You might have to wait until some exact couple minute period of the day, but you could get a look like this with natural lighting. And I'm pretty confident that that's how this was painted. But this is, like I said, a really interesting study in kind of shape and form of light coming in and casting on different surfaces and creating shadows and creating these highlights. So instead of just talking about it in terms of natural lighting, we're going to talk about how we could use some artificial lighting to make this type of look. Something that I do find really interesting that I do want everybody to notice is the light coming from the left side of the frame here is making this rhombus type shape along the back wall of the first room. And you can see a similar type of shape being put onto the wall of the room that's through the doorway. And this is a wonderful frame-in-frame kind of composition. You have the inner frame of the door that's open on the left, but then you have the larger frame of the entire doorway. And then you have the framing of the room itself, just like this. And then you have these kind of individual sort of frames in terms of these rectangles, and then the easel itself. And what I want to notice right here, though, is that there's this wonderful contrast between the painting that's on the easel, which is in this shadow, and then not only the wall behind it, which is in a more bright light area, but also the actual rhombus shape right there. And so you get these 3 points of contrast and all these hard edges all at the same time, and you have both shadow, a midtone, and a highlight all in one area, and that creates this really neat contrast. In terms of actual light sources, we do have this window right here, and then we're going to have some window that's on the inside of this room that is creating this. So our goal is basically window here, but there's something kind of tricky going on. There's also this mark along the floor, but if this light is coming in and creating this light on the wall, and then there's a light here that's presumably coming from a window, This light has to be coming from a window that's further back. So we actually need 3 windows. Now, obviously, your location is not going to be exactly the same as in this painting. So we're just going to be talking about using multiple windows to create these kinds of shapes and create angles for our light. It's never going to be exactly this. It's much more about the concept and theories here rather than reproducing this perfectly 100%. Sometimes we're able to actually kind of do that with these diagrams. In this case, I don't think so, just because of how this space functions. So we do need 3 windows, and each of these windows is going to be used to create one of these areas of light. So in Draw.io, we have floor plan tools. So let's just start building our location. So there we have our room pretty much diagrammed as it is in the painting. So now to start lighting this. Like I said, we're going to have 3 windows here to help create these various streaks. Now, the important thing about this is that we want this streak and this streak and this streak to all align with each other. You can actually kind of just trace the line all the way down of these diagonal shapes from the various windows. Now, obviously that kind of requires the windows to be exactly the same heights, there to be no obstructions outside, all that kind of stuff. But it's really part of what is interesting about this painting to me, because it's creating that kind of like line and shape and form for the diagonal lines versus so many horizontal lines, especially with our frames within frames. And technically this is a kind of a frame within a frame, and this one's a frame within a frame. Man, I love art. So let's talk about placing our lights. So if this is exactly in line with our window, then this wouldn't have this diagonal shape in particular because it would be going straight across. So we need to actually just change the angle a little bit and get this going at a maybe not exactly 45-degree angle, but maybe a 30-degree angle or so. And that's going to create that first streak. Now the importance is if we're going to get this and this and this to align, we want those lights to be at all but the exact same angle, no matter where they're positioned outside of the space. Now admittedly, this is maybe a lot less of a budget type of lighting setup because of the scale of needing these lights powerful, big, and high up outside of a physical location, most likely, unless this was a built set in a studio. In either case, it's going to be definitely a lot more grip, labor, equipment, and just overall time and money intensive to create something that's exactly trying to be like this in its style. And so I'll get to it in a couple minutes, a way to make something like this on a smaller budget. This would need pretty powerful lights most likely to work appropriately. So we have our first setup here, and part of that is because we want these shapes of the light to be narrow like this. So that means they're going to be getting cut by the actual window frame into a more narrow kind of slice of light. And to do that, usually you would need your lamps to be further away than what would be possible if you just had it kind of right at the window. And if you're going to be doing that, then you need more powerful lights, and you might need more space, and you might need more grip equipment to actually support that. And if you have more grip equipment, you're going to need more people to actually manage that too. So it does get a little bit more tricky fast if that's the case. And the other factor that would make this more expensive is that you need these lights to be probably pretty high up to get a kind of downward angle on them. The combination of the downward angle and the angle off that 90 degrees is how we get these kinds of diagonal shapes. Technically, this is pretty much what you need to pull off a look like this. You could then put your camera right here have it be not exactly in line with the door, but have it kind of in line with the door jamb on the left side. So right about there, we have our frame. It's a kind of a normal shot, and we would have this first streak right here across the floor. Then we'd have the light falling onto the wall, and then we'd have the light falling on the wall in the back room there. These lights up here would probably have to be roughly a 45-degree angle down, in addition to this, 30 to 40 degree angle, off of that 90 if it was going straight into the window. That's kind of how you would need to put your lights to achieve it. So obviously you can see why then in the case of using the sun for this type of look, all you need are basically blank windows, but the sun being really far away is creating these really hard shadows on the ground here. I'd even say you probably need to actually have Fresnel lenses on each of these to help us get a little bit more of a shaping control for our light and just have it be really focused. I mean, if we're talking really professional Hollywood type productions, these are probably gonna be at very least Fresnel lights, if not HMIs also. But that's going to be very expensive. You're going to need generators and lots more crew and lots more experience. So that's not really what we're talking about here. But that's how this could be done pretty easily. At the same time, I don't have an Arri 12K, nor do I have $25,000 to pick up one, let alone three. So now that we've talked about how you could light this type of thing without using natural light in particular, let's talk about doing a kind of more budgeted version and see where we land. So, kind of first off, what you can do is bring these lights back down towards the ground. And that way you don't have to have as much intensive grip equipment. Yes, you won't have exactly these sharp angles that are especially downwards facing, but it's a worthy sacrifice to save a lot of grip equipment cost, labor cost, time cost, all these kinds of things, and you don't have to have the light as far away. So we're going to bring these guys in closer. Now you probably are still talking about using Fresnel based lights. You could be using tungsten lights for this. You could be using higher end aperture or even some higher end GVM lights, Intelitech light cannons, those types of lights to get this kind of look if we're going to be trying to do this on a more budgeted sense. Like I said, these are probably HMIs that have Fresnels. These are really powerful, really expensive, very specialized pieces of equipment. We're trying to do it for less money, so we're going to be going with lights that cost $1,200 to buy and a couple $100s to rent rather than $25,000 to buy or several $1,000s to rent, let alone the crew required to support them. But basically by bringing them down and bringing them closer, we reduce the need for it to be a really bright light, and we reduce how much work we have to do to get them put up on, scaffolding or really big stands. All that kind of stuff is just kind of out the window because that's too much money, that's too much work, that's too much time. So we've brought them in, we have our Fresnels on there. You could do this with it pretty much any of the Aperture flagship lights. I don't think the P80S lights that I usually talk about with these things would be quite powerful enough, at least as individual lights, to pull this off necessarily. Some of the bigger GVMs, almost definitely you could still, because they have levels that are in the same range as the Aperture ones that I just mentioned. And so something that we're going to pretend here, if this is a budgeted thing and maybe we don't have a whole other window here and we're not having to then set this up on the outside here, what if this instead was a snoot? And so you bring this entire setup into the actual interior of the room, have the snoot, and we're projecting this one onto the floor with the snoot. If you want to learn more about snoots, I have videos that are linked down below about snoots. I got one last year and I love it to create just these kinds of shapes on walls and floors. And, in the background, you can get various types of window frame shapes, blinds, all sorts of things. And they're really, really useful. So to save a little bit of money and to save a little bit of work of putting it outside, we're going to put the snoot and the lamp on the inside here and just project this one onto the floor. This one is still going to be outside and this one is still going to be outside. But like I said, we've brought them down and much closer in. So we won't get this exact same angle, but we'll still get nice squares of light on the wall. If we need to, we can use barn doors to help shape it a little bit more. But then the other thing that we're going to do, because like I said, these are not going to be as bright as, huge HMI Fresnels. We have, helped that by bringing that in closer, but still we want to make sure that we get these as nice bright spots, but without having the entire room be, really, really dark. So we're going to try to supplement by using some other lighting. Now, I'm going to say we can use lanterns in here to help bring up the exposure. So kind of having this be where the window would be, coming left to right in our frame, and just bringing in some more light. This one hidden behind the doorway to bring more light to our space. And these lanterns have a pretty significant fall off. So if you can see right here, we do already have some fall off on the ground before we get to this side of the frame in particular. And we can just have this light be casting right about here, increasing the brightness on the window side, bouncing some more light around in the room without changing the overall shape. But that should give us enough extra light to make it so that this isn't so bright and this area isn't so dark. The darkest parts of this image are the back of the easel that doesn't have any direct light falling on it and the back of the doorway that doesn't have any direct light falling on it. But even the back corner on the far right side has some brightness to it because of the light bouncing around in the room. So by adding a lantern here and by adding a lantern here, we can raise up that exposure, and that way we're not relying on these lights to pass so much light into the room that it bounces around and illuminates the whole space. We get to kind of even that out a little bit, and we get to go further with these lights being less powerful ones. Now, at the same time, now we do have 5 lamps in play, but those 5 lamps are still going to be infinitely cheaper than this setup over here. If you don't have the budget to get another lantern and another lamp for both of these, even just having a lamp and a cheap softbox or having an LED panel over here, those are all great options. You could also do something where you do wait for the sun to come around to the right spot, have it casting through the windows, and use the lanterns on the inside to bring up the lighting a little bit to make this type of shot possible. Honestly, even with the HMIs over here, I would still say that we could easily use this setup to bring a little bit more light to the space, to make sure that we have a bunch of light bouncing around off these white walls and bringing up the overall exposure so that it's not just completely dark contrasted against the light coming from the HMIs. Don't get me wrong, you will not be able to get the same image between the left cheaper option and the right more expensive option. This one will just naturally be darker because you're not going to be having as much light coming in. Maybe your window shapes are not going to be as distinct, but you'll be able to get something that feels at least similar and is using this reference image as your inspiration, even if it's not a perfect recreation of it. And these topics that we're talking about here are all about how we use lighting, how we think through the production and the requirements of the space and the equipment that we have and the budget that we have and the time and labor limitations that we have to create things that we want. This one will still have light that falls on this part of the frame, light that falls on this wall, and light that falls in the back wall, as well as the shape cut out on the floor. You will still get that with this. It just might not be as distinct, but that's why this is a reference, and this is something that's inspiring us and serving to be part of our creative process, rather than just simply a recreation, which this one might be more of a recreation, but that doesn't mean you need to limit yourself to only recreating other scenes. Our goal here is to talk about a variety of scenes and a variety of ways of lighting and a variety of ways to deal with limitations and to bring the inspiration to our own projects so that we create images and stories that inspire us and our audiences. So that pretty much wraps up what we have for today. This is a really gorgeous painting because it seems kind of simple. It's just an empty room, right? But in terms of how the actual composition works with the frames within frames, the frame of the bottom of the wall and the top of the wall, the painting in there, the painting on the easel in there, the doorway, all of those different pieces all kind of coming together, it creates this actually really wonderful and complex composition. And the actual lighting for it, it must have just been gorgeous seeing the light coming in from these windows and to create this kind of cascading rhombus shape across these two rooms. I think this is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm very grateful that we were able to talk about it today because I think it also discussed a lot of different things and ways that we can work with lighting through windows as indie filmmakers to get something that we like for our stories. Like I said at the beginning, if you want to pick up this free filmmaker tools template with all these different kinds of tools up here, that's available on my Patreon. It's completely free. You can go pick it up. I just want to be able to help people get more diagramming skills so that they have more that they can bring to pre-production, can bring more into their inspiration, can analyze reference images for themselves, and just really just work on building visual style that, like I said a minute ago, inspires you and inspires your audience. If you like this kind of video, please give me a like down below. I would really appreciate it. It helps me reach new viewers through the YouTube algorithm. If you want to subscribe for more videos about lighting diagrams, lighting techniques, cinematography, and filmmaking in general with an indie filmmaking, very, very micro budget sense, I would love to have you. I put out videos pretty much weekly. If you want to get the kinds of tools we've been talking about, not the HMIs, I have affiliate links down in the video's description that help support this channel. If you do want to purchase something from GVM, I have an affiliate code that will save you 10%. That's also down in the video's description. And you can join me over on Patreon, where if you join the free tiers, you'll get notified when I posted new videos. And if you join the paid tiers, you can vote on upcoming video topics and even some different paintings for upcoming lighting diagrams, as well as the option to watch ad-free on Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope that you have an absolutely wonderful week ahead of you. Remember that wearing a mask in public helps keep yourself and those around you, your colleagues, your friends, your family, and your entire community safer from transmittable illness. And as indie filmmakers who are working on really micro budgets, it's really important to make sure that we stay healthy and that we don't lose days to being sick. So go out there this week, take care of yourself, take care of others. I hope you watch a few good movies, and just overall, have an awesome day.